This is our first session in the Flex Work Style series of Work It Out with MFS. We do have two more after this in May and June on freelancing, and I will speak a little bit more to those at the end of the session. But to get going, I just want to introduce you to Brie Reynolds. Like I said, she works for FlexJobs, and she's a senior career specialist. And Brie is joining us from Boston. So Brie is a professional career coach and expert in all things flexible employment. In her role at FlexJobs, she aims to help people be the best job seekers they can be. So she does this through writing, content, management, webinars, and press outreach. So we're very grateful that Brie has agreed to present to us today. She's worked with the military spouse population in the U.S. And is familiar with the military family life challenges. And so for anyone who did join on the teleconference, we just ask that you will mute your phone, please, just so that we don't get feedback. Excellent. Okay, so Brie, I am just going to pass you over the ball, and then you are able to get going there.
All right. Thanks, Katie. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, we can hear you great.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for having me. I'm very happy to be here today and to be talking about the world of flexible work. It's something that I've spent the last 8 years of my life working in. So I have a flexible job, and I also help people find flexible jobs. So as Katie mentioned, I love this sort of topic, and I'm really excited to talk to you all about it today. So a couple of the topics that we'll be going over today, I'm going to go briefly just a little bit about myself and FlexJobs so you know kind of where I'm coming from and what my experience is. And then we'll get right into trends in the remote and flexible job market. So we'll be talking about who's working flexibly, what the jobs look like, which companies are hiring, and all of that sort of stuff. Then we'll go into finding jobs and companies for flexible work. How do you actually start this search process? What are the best tools and techniques for finding flexible jobs? And then how do you actually put yourself out there or position yourself for flexible jobs? How can you become a job seeker who is clear to employers is a good fit for this way of working? So just a little bit about myself in FlexJobs. We celebrated our 10th anniversary in 2017, and I've been with FlexJobs for about 8 years now. We're a job search website that lists pre-screened telecommuting, flexible schedule, full-time and part-time, and freelance jobs. So anything that takes you outside of that traditional 9 to 5 or 9 to 6, 8 to 6, whatever the typical business hours are, out of that traditional office environment, and gives you more freedom and control in when and where and how you're working. And we list jobs in the US and Canada and worldwide. So we have a pretty big database of jobs that are available for people regardless of where you are living. And we've also helped over 3 million job seekers since we were founded back in 2007. And we have over 49,000 researched and vetted companies at our site and it's actually a free database that you can search yourself if you wanted to search for a particular company to see if they're flexible, or to search by location or career field to find companies that support flexibility. It's a really handy database and has lots of companies in there that have offered flexible jobs in the past, and many of whom are currently offering them. And we're also a membership site, just to give a little bit of information on how FlexJobs works. We are focused completely on the job seekers. So we don't take money from employers to post jobs. We don't have any ads on our site. Our entire model is based on job seekers paying a subscription fee, and in return, hopefully getting a really good service for finding flexible professional level jobs that really fit their lives. And so, yeah, we also have a lot of free and open to the public resources. Like I said, that company database is a great one to start with, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in future slides. But again, my name is Brie Reynolds, and I'm the Senior Career Specialist at FlexJobs, and I've been a career and job search advisor for almost 15 years now. I started out in college career advising, and when I found out that my husband would be relocated for his job every year for about 5 years, I knew I couldn't hold down a regular job. There's no way to bring that office job with you unless you were able to find something that was remote and flexible. And so that's how I got started in this area. I wound up working for FlexJobs actually in a part-time freelance role to begin with. Since then, I've moved into full-time work, and I've worked from home completely since 2009, so a long time. I haven't been in an office in a really long time. And I've been able to take my job with me across 5 different states in the US and through many different moves. So while I'm not a military spouse myself, I definitely understand the value of being able to find work that travels with you and that's flexible enough to fit whatever is going on in your life. So I've experienced that myself quite a bit. Okay, so let's dive into the flexible job market. And as Katie mentioned, if you have questions as we're going through the presentation, you can enter those into the chat area, and we'll try to get to as many of those as we can towards the end. So what is exactly a flexible job? I want to get us all on the same page because I'm going to be using that phrase quite a bit during the presentation, and I just want to make sure we all understand what that is. What is a flexible job? So we consider flexible jobs based on a few different criteria. We look at both formal and informal arrangements. So some companies have flexible jobs where they will have a set policy in place that people can work from home so many days per week, or they can shift their hours or whatever it might be, and it's pretty formalized. And then other companies have informal policies where each manager might decide whether a job can be flexible or not, and it might change depending on the needs of the company. So it's a little bit more flexible and informal. But we look at both of those to kind of see what a flexible job could be. And we find that there is flexibility in terms of scheduling, location, status, and hours. So for scheduling, obviously a flexible schedule or an alternative schedule where you're not confined to traditional business hours, we would consider those things to be flexible. The location is definitely something that's flexible if you can work from home either part of the time or all of the time. And we typically refer to that as telecommuting and remote. And I'll get to that, to why the terminology is a little bit different in a few slides. And then we look at the status of the person working, whether they're a freelancer or an employee. Freelance jobs are sort of inherently flexible because they give you control over who you're working with, what your hours are, the type of work that you're doing, how often you're doing that work, and where you're actually working from. And then employee roles can be flexible, but they have to include some other type of flexibility. So if you're an employee, you would have to have something like a flexible schedule or be able to work from home, and then we would consider that job a flexible job. And then the last one are the hours. So part-time jobs, again, it's sort of inherently flexible. You're working a reduced schedule. You're able to take care of things outside of work a little bit more because you have more free time. And then full-time jobs could be flexible provided they have some other type of flexibility. Now, these are just some statistics of the number of people who have flexible jobs in Canada. And what I was able to find was specific to telecommuting and freelancing. So just like in the States here, we've seen a big increase in telecommuting over the last 5 to 10 years. That same trend is happening in Canada. So in 2013, occasional telecommuting was 18% of the workforce, so people who were able to work from home at least some of the time on a regular basis. And that has gone way up to 47% as of 2017. Now, occasional telecommuting means you can be in the office sometimes and at home other times, and there's a big, wide-ranging definition for exactly what that means depending on each position and each company. Freelancing, I wasn't able to find anything from earlier, but now the statistic is between 20 and 30% of the workforce in Canada is freelancing, and that includes people who freelance full-time, and that is their only or sole source of income, and people who freelance in addition to working part-time or full-time in a more traditional job. So we see the same thing in the States. There's definitely a lot of growth across the board for flexible jobs, and that's good news for anybody who's looking for a flexible job. They are more available now than they have been in the past. Okay, so this slide goes into the top career fields for flexible jobs. This is based on FlexJobs job posting data. And so what we do is we look at which career fields are seeing the most number of job listings. And since all the jobs on our site are flexible jobs, we're able to tell that these career fields have a high number of flexible jobs. It's out of 55 career fields that we find this top 20. So if you're not seeing something on this slide that really resonates with you, it's all right. There are lots more opportunities out there. This is really just the top of the top where we see the most listings, but it doesn't mean there aren't listings in a lot of other career fields. There definitely are. But one thing to notice on this slide, and actually on the next few slides, is the variety of jobs that can be flexible. So I think sometimes we consider you know, oh, what would a flexible job be? Maybe it would be working from home in customer service or data entry or in the tech industry. And while those things are true, there are a lot more opportunities than just those kind of typical ones that we might think of right off the top of our head. So medical and health is actually the top career field for flexible jobs. We see a lot of education-related jobs, administrative, bilingual jobs, jobs requiring lots of great language skills, marketing, business development, software development, all sorts of different things. And I think that's really interesting to note is that there is a lot of variety. And so when you're looking at this and you're kind of wondering, what could I do in a flexible job? You know, what would I like to do? What am I qualified to do? Hopefully this list gives you some ideas of where you might be able to go. So you could stay in a career field that you've been in, or you could branch out into something new. So this is just a chance for you to think about the possibilities. So I took a look at the top companies that are based in Canada hiring for flexible jobs, and these are, I think, are the top 20 or so of jobs that are, companies that are hiring for flexible jobs that are headquartered in Canada. And so as you can see, this kind of reflects the previous slide in terms of the variety that's being offered, the types of companies, large and small, that are offering flexible work. And just to give you an idea of what's out there, you know, big companies, well-known companies are hiring for flexible jobs. And sometimes we think maybe it's just startups or, like I said, companies in the tech industry. And those are hiring for flexible jobs for sure, but there are a lot of more well-established, larger companies doing the same. And the good thing is that because remote work has grown so much, you're not necessarily only able to apply to jobs that are with Canadian-based companies. Remote work allows you to find opportunities with companies that are based elsewhere around the world, in the US, in Europe, Asia, all over the place. And so that's a really good thing. It helps open you up to more possibilities and kind of widens your job market and helps you find more work than would be in your local area. And then the last list that I want to toss your way has to do with the most common remote job titles. And the reason I'm focusing on remote, which is working from home or telecommuting, is because whenever we survey job seekers and we ask what is the #1 type of flexibility that you would want if you could pick a flexible job, 80% or so, 80%, 81%, depends on the year, say that working from home 100% of the time or working remotely is their #1 choice. And so clearly there is a very high demand for remote jobs. People want to work from home. And that is leaps and bounds above the second choice, which is usually flexible scheduling. And then the third choice is working from home part of the time. So being able to work remotely at least some of the time is the third choice. So clearly remote work either all the time or part of the time is very popular. It's what people are looking for. And that's why I wanted to show you the top remote job titles that we see in the FlexJobs database. So these job titles are the ones that really come up over and over that companies are listing for flexible jobs, remote jobs in particular. And as you can see, again, there's a lot of variety. There are jobs at all sorts of different career levels, which I think is really important. For some people, you know, you are looking for more of an entry-level position, and for other people, it might be more of a senior-level position. And there are positions that kind of fill each of those levels. So just keep these sorts of things in mind. It's only 20 job titles out of many thousands of job titles that we see. So again, it's not the end-all be-all list. So if you're not seeing something on here that you would like in particular, not a huge deal. There's probably something out there for you. It just will take a little bit more research, but just to give you a sense of the variety and, again, get you thinking about possibilities. Okay, so now that we have a bit of a lay of the land of the flexible job market, I want to talk about finding jobs in companies. How do you actually go about finding open, available, flexible jobs and or the companies that are offering them? So how to actually find pinpoint flexible job listings. So of course there's FlexJobs. I've talked about that a little bit, but the second thing I would say is for wherever you're searching online, look for smaller job search websites. The reason that I say that is because the large job boards that are out there, they do a great job of compiling millions of job listings into one place. But most people don't need millions of job listings. They need a handful of job listings that are tailored to them, that really fit what they're looking for, and that offer flexibility. And so being able to narrow down those many millions of job listings into the few that you might need, it can be time-consuming and pretty difficult. Smaller job search sites are going to have fewer listings for sure, but they'll be a little bit more tailored to you and what you're looking for. And I think it's a better use of your time. It'll take you less time to pinpoint jobs, and you can spend more time crafting really good applications and you know, connecting with people that you might know at the company and doing those sorts of job search tasks. So rather than list all of the many smaller job boards that are out there, because there are many, many of them, there's a couple different lists out there that have compiled them nicely for us. So Proven.com, every year they do this list of the 100 plus job boards for job seekers and recruiters. They just updated this in February of this year, so it should be pretty recent. And the list is categorized by career field, so you can find what you're looking for based on the type of work that you actually want to do. And then SkillCrush.com has a list of the 25 best sites for finding remote work. So they're focused on jobs that actually will allow you to work remotely, and that's a really great resource, lots of different sites out there. And then Forbes compiled a list of the 79 websites to get freelance jobs fast. So if you're looking for freelancing in particular, that's a great resource. And I believe that one is divided up by career field also, or the type of freelancing that you would do. So if you Google any of these lists, you'll be able to find them pretty quickly. And they all offer some really helpful places to go to find smaller job search boards that may offer you a little bit easier of an experience finding listings that match what you're looking for. I would also recommend checking out any industry or professional associations in your particular career field. Those can be really helpful because not only do they offer job postings usually, but they also offer events. So they'll do either webinars or in-person events where you can actually connect with other people who are in the same field and start to ask them about their job search experience and what they would recommend. And then the last thing I will say is to talk to your friends, your family, your neighbors, your professional network, your military spouse groups, and ask them for their advice. You know, if you know someone who's recently got a job, you can ask them, what tactics worked for you? You know, how did you find that job? Is it flexible? Do you know of any companies that offer flexible jobs? Really just kind of striking up that conversation, getting it going. The more people who know that you are actively seeking a job, the more people you have out there who might be casually listening and pick up on a job somewhere that you might be qualified for and send it your way. So it doesn't have to be a direct ask of these people to help you find a job. That's a little bit awkward and probably not something that we would want to do. But you can just let them know you're looking and ask for their advice. You know, do they have any favorite job boards? Do they have any, you know, favorite ways to format a resume? All of that sort of stuff can be really helpful in terms of not only helping you advance your job search, but having this group of people out there who are keeping you in the back of their mind in case they hear of anything. Okay, so I talked before about how we tend to refer to telecommuting or remote jobs with those keywords, telecommuting, remote. And the reason is that when you use phrases like work from home or work at home, you're more likely to come across job scams than legitimate jobs. So I'll talk about scams in another few slides, but essentially work from home and work at home are phrases that are used by a lot of scammers who know that people are looking for that type of job. And so they've put out lots of different listings for scam jobs in hopes of luring people in and either getting, you know, personally identifiable sensitive information, trying to steal your identity or gain access to your bank account or your credit card, or to have you pay them money to get a job, like a work from home job kit or something like that. So there's a lot of different reasons that scammers do this sort of thing. But what we know is that they tend to use work from home and work at home most often. So if you eliminate those keywords when you're searching online, you're much more likely to avoid scams, and that's a good thing. So some of the keywords that you could use include, on that first list, for at-home work, I really like telecommute, virtual, and remote. Those seem to be the ones that legitimate employers use most often when they're posting these types of jobs. So if you're searching with those keywords, you're going to find a good number of opportunities. There are also some other things like distributed team, home-based, open nationwide, and a few others that I've listed there. Those are used less often, but it might be worth you searching with those key phrases at least a little bit to see what comes back, because sometimes it depends on the industry that you're in or the type of career field. The terminology can be different, and so this will help you figure out what exactly the best search terms are for you. And then there are some other really good phrases to use if you're looking for freelance or gig work, or if you're looking for flexible hours, and so those are all listed there. And what I would recommend for each of these types of flexibility is to play around with the keywords that you're using. When you're on a job search website, use different keywords, see what types of listings you get back, how many you get back, and you'll start to see patterns of which ones are the most effective for you. So you might be able to narrow down your keyword usage to something like remote jobs and open nationwide, because you see those used quite a lot in your searching. But the key lesson is stay away from work from home and work at home. Now that doesn't mean if you are looking for advice on like how do I write a resume for a work from home job or something like that, and you're reading articles or going to blogs that are talking about it, that's probably pretty safe. We talk about the act of working from home all the time. And so if you're reading advice and articles and things like that, that's fine. It's more when you're looking at job listings in particular that you want to stay away from those phrases. Okay, so let's talk about how to find flexible companies, because there are more companies now actually saying out loud that they're offering flexible jobs, which is great. In the past, companies have liked to hide that a little bit, so they won't actually talk about their flexibility until you get hired. But now we're seeing more companies coming out and saying that they are actually flexible companies and that they support this type of thing. So over at FlexJobs, on the FlexJobs blog, we have a whole section dedicated to companies for flexible jobs. So we put out lists all the time, a few lists each week of different companies that are hiring for flexible jobs. You can get really good insights into what the company does, the type of flexibility that they support, and the types of jobs that they're hiring for, of course. We also put out this list each year of the 100 top companies with remote jobs, and actually that should be updated to in 2018 because we did just put that out in January. And this list is a great list to start with if you're looking for remote work in particular. It's 100 companies that posted the most remote jobs over the last year. And so we think they're a pretty good bet to post remote jobs in the future because they tend to have these long histories of posting remote work. We also have that guide to the best companies for flexible jobs that I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation. And you can actually narrow that to companies that are based in Canada that are the best companies for flexible jobs. And it's a free resource, totally open to the public, so you can access that. And you can also search by company name. So let's say that you are on a different job search website and you find a job listing and it looks great, but it doesn't offer any type of insight into flexibility at the company or whether you could work remotely. If you go to this FlexJobs company guide and search for that company by name, you'll be able to see if they've ever posted a flexible job. You'll be able to see that information on the guide. You'll see their history of job postings, the type of flexibility, the type of job, and you'll be able to get a little bit of insight into if that company is flexible or not. And then I would also recommend going directly to a company's careers page and doing a little bit of detective work to see if they talk about things like work-life balance or if they have any sections related to flexible work. Those are all good hints that the company is probably open to flexibility even if they're not listing their jobs that way. And also, just in terms of figuring out which companies you'd like to work for, I always recommend thinking of former customers, vendors, business partners, basically any company that you've ever interacted with in your life that has left you with a positive impression. And the reason that those are good companies to do some research on and see if they're hiring, see if they're offering flexible work, is because you already have a positive association with that company. So not only do you know that they are either, a good company because they provide a great product or service, or their customer service was great, or whatever it might be, somebody who used to work there and they had a really good experience. You have that positive association, but then you also can use that in your application process, in the interview process. You can draw that connection and say, oh, I've long admired your company because of X, Y, and Z. So you actually have a connection that you can then use to talk about why you would like to work for the company. So that's always a nice thing to have. Okay, so let's talk just for a minute about how to avoid job scams. So I mentioned that not using the phrases work from home or work at home, that goes a long way to helping you avoid these. But some other warning signs of scams, and scams are listed all over the place. So whether you're on a job search website or a networking site like LinkedIn, or you are just seeing these things come into your email and go straight to your spam box, hopefully, scams kind of come at you from all different angles. So it's important to know the warning signs so that you can stay away from them. So if you are looking at a job listing and there's no company name, or they're using a generic email address, so something like a Gmail or a Yahoo Mail, that's one sign. Oh, and I should say right off the bat, each individual thing that I've listed here is one warning sign, but it's not a 100% guarantee that what you're dealing with is a scam. It's just something to throw up a little red flag in your brain to say, hey, stop for a minute, do a little bit more research, see if this is really legitimate or not. So these are, like I said, signs or red flags, but they're not, a blinking red sign that says this is definitely a scam. The more things you start to see from this list in one job listing, the more likely you're dealing with a scam. If the job description is very vague or there's actually no job description at all and they really spend more time talking about how much money you're going to make and how flexible the job is and how easy it is to get the job, that's a big red flag. If they try to conduct your job interview over Instant Messenger or IM, that's another red flag. I do know of about 5 or so companies that do job interviews over Instant Messenger, but that's out of that database of 49,000 companies that we've been looking at over the years. So it's very few legitimate companies that will do their interviews this way. So again, it's a warning sign. It doesn't necessarily mean you're definitely dealing with a scam, but it's something to do a little bit more research on. This is a big one. If you're offered a job immediately and you're urged to accept it without having time to think about it or talk to your spouse or consider it at all, that's a big red flag. Scammers really want to get you to act quickly. They don't want you to spend time thinking about it because the more you think about the situation, the more likely you're going to go, this doesn't seem quite right. And they don't want you to get to that point. They want you to accept, jump in, and give them your information. So yeah, if you're getting urged to accept it, that's time to take a pause. And then copycat companies. So this is one we've seen in recent years where a scammer will essentially impersonate a real well-known company. So it's happened with companies like General Electric, Google, CNBC, lots of well-known companies where you would see the name and go, oh, I would love to work for that company. That's a big company and they're offering remote work. That's great. And so you might get further into the process and not really realize that this is actually a scam. So the main way to tell the difference, because they use that company's logo, they use their website design, they do a really good job of copycatting these companies. But if you look at the web address, that URL, they can't copycat that. They have to make their own. So they try to make it as similar to the real companies they can, but there's always a little bit of a difference. So this is just an example of what you might see. A fake one might look like gecareers.com, and then a real one would be ge.com/careers. And so you can see there's just a little bit of difference between the fake scam company and the real company's web address. And look for those small differences. You could, and I'll show you kind of how to do that comparison on the next slide, but that'll save you a lot of time and frustration. The biggest thing I will say for when you're looking for this type of work and you think you might have come across something that doesn't sound quite right is to trust your instincts. So everybody that I've talked to who has found a scam or been victim of a scam has said at some point that they knew something was off, they didn't feel like the process was going properly, the recruiter wasn't acting quite right, or the job listing had a lot of spelling mistakes, or there was just something that made them think twice for just a second, but they ignored that instinct and they kept going because they really wanted to get a job. And nobody likes to job search, as far as I know. I wouldn't say nobody. Some people do, but most of us do not think it's the most fun activity in the world. And so when we're offered the opportunity to get a job and stop having a job search, it's very tempting to keep going, even if we think things aren't quite right. So trust your instincts, listen to those gut feelings that you have, and spend a few minutes doing extra research to see what you're dealing with. It can really save you a lot of time and frustration in the long run. So just quickly, 2 simple methods to identify scams. The first is for any job or company that you're not quite sure about, you're wondering if it's a scam, maybe it could be. If you open up a new browser and search for that company's name or the job title and the keyword scam, you will find anything that comes back that other people have alerted the internet to that it's a scam. So if people are reviewing that company on the Better Business Bureau website, or sometimes the FBI actually comes out with articles online of different types of scams and how people can avoid them. They might have reported it. You might find something like a local news article about a person who had been scammed in that particular way. So there's a lot of reporting being done about these scams online. If you're doing a search for it, you'll be able to find it. The second thing is for well-known companies where you think you might be dealing with a copycat scammer, again, open up a new browser and then search for the real company's name and the keyword careers to find their real careers page. And then you can compare that web address, that URL, with the potentially fake one that you think you might have found. So you can see if you're on the same page or not. If not, you might have stumbled onto a scam page. But again, these take, a few minutes at a time, and you can save yourself a big headache in the long run. Okay, so our last topic is on positioning yourself for flexible jobs, and this really goes into how to put yourself out there as somebody who is really interested in flexible work and also able to do flexible work really well. So I divided this up into a couple different ways. We're going to first talk about the skills you might already have that you're going to want to put on your resume and your LinkedIn profile and wherever you're putting yourself out there as a job seeker. And then we'll talk about skills you can easily build on the next slide. So we've asked employers, quite a lot of employers, about what skills they look for in remote and flexible workers. These skills are outside of the ability to actually do the job. So you do need the qualifications to do the job itself, but you should also really play up any of the skills that you have on this list. So digital communication skills, both verbal and written. If you are an excellent speaker, if you are known as a great communicator, you can bring people together and sort of go back and forth between them and see what they're trying to say and help communicate it. If you're really good at writing, all of those types of skills are very helpful in a flexible work environment, because a lot of the communicating you're going to do with your boss or your coworkers is verbal and written, but it's not in person. So being able to speak really well or write really well goes a long way to helping you communicate in a flexible team environment. The next thing, time management, task management, and the ability to focus. These are 3 things that basically get to the root of what employers fear when they hire flexible workers, which is, can I trust this person to stay on task and do their work and focus and get the job done? So anything you can say about that on your resume, including these types of skills, that can really help. Also, being a proactive communicator, asking proactive questions, being the person to start a conversation instead of waiting for someone else to start it, and not being afraid to speak up for yourself. These are some really good attributes to have as a flexible worker. Also being comfortable with technology and basic troubleshooting skills. So, if an error message pops up on your computer, it's not the end of the world. Generally the steps that you should take to see if you can fix it, and that it's something that you're not afraid of doing, and also not afraid of learning new technology as well. And then having a growth mindset. This kind of goes hand in hand with that last bullet, but embracing change and learning new things. I think that's a big piece of this. And in a flexible office environment, companies are trying new things all the time. They're trying different tools for communicating. They're trying different ways of project management and things like that. So embracing that newness and that constant need to learn new things is a really good thing. And then being familiar with remote communication tools, which brings me to the next slide, skills you can easily build. So we also talk to employers about the top communication tools that they use on their flexible teams. And so we've divided it up into 4 areas. There's instant messaging, or IM. There's video conferencing, or web conferencing, file sharing, and virtual office environments. And so each of these areas, I've listed some of the kind of name brand products that most of the employers we talk to use. So these are the biggest ones we found that people are using on a regular basis. Now, the reason I list these as skills you can easily build is because if you're not familiar with these, most of them offer free versions or free trials. So you can actually go out now and for free start to become familiar with them. So I would pick, one or two from each category that you don't already know, and make a note to yourself to do a little bit of homework after the presentation to go out and get those free versions or free trials and start playing around with them, seeing how they work, just enough to become familiar with them. And once you're familiar with them, you can add them to your resumes and your LinkedIn profile and really stand out as somebody who is prepared to communicate in a flexible work environment. Okay, so let's talk about resumes. Now that I'm saying, here are all the skills you should put on your resume. Well, how do you actually do that? Where do you put them? What does it look like? I've got some examples on the next slide. But one thing I do want to ask is whether you have previous flexible work experience or not. So previous flexible work experience could be, like I said at the very beginning, either informal or formal. So if you have officially worked from home for the past 6 years, of course, that's an easy call. You have previous flexible work experience. If you've been freelancing a little bit on the side, but you're able to get projects done and you're productive, that's freelance, or that's a flexible work experience also. And then if you have even a more informal arrangement where you take work at home, you take work to your home at night and on the weekends to get it done, you're finishing up projects at home, or maybe you're working from home when the kids are sick and home from school. If you're able to be productive and effective in those situations, that counts as experience because you know what it takes to work from home and be successful doing that. So anything like that that's more of an informal experience, that should be noted on your resume as well. If you really don't have any flexible work experience, not to worry, there are definitely some things we can do. That includes the flexible skills that I've been talking about and those technology and communication tools. That's what you really want to highlight. Oh, and actually, volunteer work, yes. One person just asked, and I know it's so pertinent to this slide that I wanted to address that. Yes, your experience working from home does not have to be paid. Volunteer work absolutely counts. And so you don't have to section it off on your resume into a separate area and make it look like it's less worthy than your paid work experience. I say if it's, good experience that you can talk about in an interview and it's not, it's enough to talk about, that there really is something there that you've done, absolutely include that in your experience. And if it was flexible, make sure that you point that out on your resume. Okay, so here are a few examples. These are real resumes that people have written for flexible jobs. There's just different sections here of 3 different resumes, so you can see how people have done this. So the top one, this person worked remotely in that position the entire time. So they've put it in that line where you put the job title, the company's name, your dates of employment, and then they've got remote position in there. Simple enough. I would say I would mirror the language of the jobs that you're applying for. So if you're applying for jobs where the companies are calling it telecommuting and not remote, I would change the wording on your resume to telecommuting instead of remote so that you're really matching their language. The second example is the technology skills section of your resume, which I definitely recommend everyone have. I've been reviewing a lot of resumes recently, and I've noticed that this is one of those sections that's missing quite a lot. I would recommend that you put this on, especially for remote and flexible work, because like I talked about, those communication tools and technology, software programs and things like that are very important in this type of job market. So you can have, your standard things on there like Microsoft Office Suite or, Windows and Mac proficient or whatever it might be. But then there's this nice thing that you can add in here called tools used for effective remote work or freelance work or telecommuting or whatever it might be that you're going for. And then listing the types of tools that you're familiar with. And also the line, new tools adopted on a regular basis. I think that helps employers to see that you are a continuous learner and you're not going to be shying away from having to learn new things. And then the last section is, it's that section at the top of your resume that is either called a summary of qualifications or a professional profile or something like that. And this person has in here that they do have 6 years experience working remotely and in flexible office environments. And I like that phrase because it doesn't say, I worked from home full-time 5 days a week. They're just, 6 years experience working remotely. That would apply to somebody who's worked from home a few days per week or every single day of the week. But it's kind of consistent, over 6 years, they've really built that up. And then in flexible office environments is a really good all-encompassing phrase. If you have lots of different flexible work experience, some of it official, some of it unofficial, all that sort of stuff gets kind of put into that one group, flexible office environments, and I like that. This is also a really good place to tout your skills. So communication skills, time and task management, the ability to focus. I actually saw one person today who put on their resume their home office setup because they were noticing with remote jobs, a lot of times employers specified you must have a dedicated home office. So they actually put that right on their resume, dedicated home office, high-speed internet, dual monitors, the works, whatever they had at home to show that they were ready to work from home. So you can get creative in these different areas, and this is really, building a resume for the type of flexible job you're going after is a really good idea. Okay, one last tip, and then I think we are ready for questions. When you're networking, I recommend shifting the conversation. So a lot of times we're asking people what they do for a living, and by networking, I mean any conversation you're having related to jobs or work with anybody, your friends, your family, your chiropractor, somebody that you're sitting next to on a plane. Ask what they do for a living, but also follow up and ask how they do it. Because the more we get to know about people, the more I realize anyway, that people are working flexibly that I didn't know. I have an aunt who actually works from home 3 or 4 days a week. I didn't learn that until last year, and she's been my aunt for my whole life. So asking these types of questions, not just what they do, but how they do it, is a good shift in the conversation that can help you get a little bit of insight into other people's work lives, what they would recommend, what companies they work for, how they got a flexible job. It opens up your conversation to be a little bit more fruitful for exactly what you're looking for. Okay, I also wanted to include just some advice from the military spouses that we have talked to on FlexJobs, because I thought that this advice is all good, and so I wanted to share it. The first one in orange is talking about don't stop trying and don't get lazy. It is really, job searching is not easy, and sometimes it takes a long time, and it can get frustrating, and you can get tired and not want to do it anymore. But this person really recommends crafting a custom cover letter for each position and tailoring your resume for each position. You don't have to rewrite your resume, but updating your resume in key areas like your summary of qualifications or your key accomplishments with the language from the job description for the job that you're applying for will go really far in helping you get in front of that employer. And then also researching. She recommends researching the companies quite a lot. And then Adrian, who was stationed in Japan at the time that she wrote us, said, it took a bit of time, but I actually found exactly what I was searching for. So again, that goes back into job searching does take time. And so, really plan to be in this for a little while, and don't think that things will come right away, because then you're going to get frustrated really easily when you're not hearing back immediately from employers. And then Desiree, who is in Oklahoma, she said, don't focus on finding a position in an industry that you've always been in. Venture out and explore positions that you've always wanted to apply for. I think that's a really nice way of just saying expand your horizons. Don't box yourself in. You probably have skills and experience that could apply to a number of different career fields, and you might want to actually try applying to a number of different career fields and see what comes back. You really never know. Okay, so while we have some questions coming in here, I'm just going to review some of the specific steps you can take after this presentation, and then we can jump into questions. So first is choose the types of flexibility you want. So before you even choose the type of career or the type of job that you're going into, think about the type of flexibility that would be most helpful in your life. Is it working from home? Is it working part-time? Having a flexible schedule? Is it picking up freelance clients? Think about what would work best for your particular situation, and know that your choice is not a choice that you will be stuck with forever. You might do a remote job for a year and decide that you would rather work in an office, but you'd like to work part-time. That's okay. We're just talking about right now in your life, what would work best for you. researching your career field for what's being offered. So actually getting out there and seeing, is this a viable option? If I want to work remotely 100% of the time, what's being offered in my career field or similar types of fields that I could actually do that. And then identifying your best flex-friendly skills and experiences and signing up for free versions of communication tools and testing those out. And then actually updating your application materials with those skills, those experiences, and those tools. And start reaching out to your network. And by network, I just mean people that you're going to have friendly conversations with, no pressure. And actually apply for flexible jobs. That's kind of the big one. I think sometimes we get stuck in analysis and planning, and we forget to actually apply for jobs. You really do have to apply. Okay, so I'm happy to take questions now. Katie, however many we have, see how we can get through, how many we can get through.
For sure, so we'll get started. The first question I think is actually being answered on the screen right now. So someone was asking about the subscription fee. And so it is on the screen there, and you'll see that there's a promo code for you to get 30% off. And again, this isn't, there's lots of free resources also on FlexJobs, like Brie mentioned, so we encourage you to take a look at it, the free options, and see what's available to make sure it suits your needs. So that question is answered. Oh, when does the CMFS expire? When does that promo code expire?
It will never expire, so
okay.
You can use it whenever. And also, I know sometimes on these calls I'll have people who are FlexJobs members and who say, wait a minute, I didn't get that code. You can actually contact our client services and have it applied to your account. So you will get the 30% discount refunded to you, essentially. So feel free to reach out if you're already a member but you didn't get to use the code.
Excellent. Okay, so first question, someone was asking if MFS offers flexible and remote jobs. So that's kind of for me. So yes and no. Military Family Services hires people that are working out in OutCan. So there's coordinators in each OutCan posting. So there's around 5 of them. Those are actually usually all remote positions. They were just posted a few weeks ago, and I think they've already closed. But those positions are all done remotely, and there are other options where sometimes once you're working within CFMWS, there have been options where military spouses have been able to work from home and have flexible employment accommodation, but it's all done on a case-by-case basis. So that's just to answer that question. One question about if you're looking at flexible jobs from other countries, Brie, do you need to have a work visa to take them? And does residency play a role at all? So if you were in Canada and you were looking to work for a U.S. company.
Good question. So most of the time the company will be very specific in the job listing about who they're hiring for. If it says that it's an employee role and that it's open to people in Canada, that means that they're willing to sponsor you. And so it's something you would probably want to double check with in the interview just to make sure, but if it's an employee role and it does say that it's open to people in Canada, then that's a really good indicator that they would be willing to sponsor you for that sort of visa. If it's a freelance job, which we do see a lot of, that means they can hire anybody from anywhere, and essentially that you don't need that visa step because it's freelancing, it's contract, and essentially you as the freelancer would be sort of self-employed or just a business of one, contracting your work to that company. So that's kind of the distinction there is it an employee job or is it a freelance job? If it's an employee job, you want to look for where they're actually hiring from. And so on FlexJobs, we denote that pretty easily. So we'll have a Canadian flag if it's open to Canadian residents and a U.S. flag or whatever other country's flags if it's open to people in different countries.
To look at CRA as well, just to look at when you are a freelancer, and we're going to get more into that in our next 2 sessions. There's definitely tax implications in certain things, and so we will provide in the next 2 sessions some resources as to how you can check out if there are any tax implications depending on where you're working, because that's obviously dependent on country.
Yes.
So
I would highly recommend, if you're interested in freelancing, definitely attend those sessions because yeah, there's a lot to know. It can be a really nice way to work, but also there's a lot to know.
Yeah, for sure. So you were talking about a resume, and when you're looking for flexible work, how long do you think a resume should be, Brie?
Sure. So I think pretty much the standard from what I've seen is 1 to 2 pages. any more than 2 pages, and that's really going too far. So you could narrow down your experience and try to edit yourself a little bit to get to 2 pages. But if you have, more than 5 to 7 years of experience, 2 pages is absolutely the norm. It's around that 5-year mark where you kind of balance between 1 and 2 pages, and it really just ultimately depends on your experience and your skills and making it really relevant to that one employer that you're applying to. So if you've got maybe 5 or 7 years of experience and you think you can get it onto 1 page by eliminating some things, that's probably the way to go. If you have enough experience that is really relevant to that particular job and employer and it gets you onto 2 pages, that's okay too. But anything more than 2, I would say, is probably too long.
Excellent. So that answered a few questions there. Someone was wondering about, is it better to keep things short and relative or put everything chronologically? We've talked a lot about using kind of trying to stay away from the functional format of a resume. In Canada here, we've seen that a lot of employers aren't really looking for the skill-based resume, and they like seeing things chronologically. And what's your opinion on that, Brie?
That's really good to know, because here in the U.S., we're definitely seeing a big switch in the last couple of years. It seems like we were chronological for a really long time, and then all of a sudden, every resume that I see and the employers that I talk to want them to be more functional. Okay. But it's still functional with a big chronological component. So, right. The top has like a summary of your qualifications and maybe some keywords that deal with your skills and your experience, but then there is still that big list of your chronological experience. So it's kind of like that hybrid between the two. So yeah, exactly. I guess that's what we're seeing is the hybrid.
Yeah, and that's what we've been, because you're able to show your transferable skills on the top and definitely highlight some of those flexible employment skills. But exactly, and then having still the chronological experience there.
Oh, perfect. Same thing then.
Yeah, same thing. So in regards to education on resumes, would it be pertinent to state if you've achieved any certificates, diplomas, etc. via distance learning?
Oh, yes. Great idea, especially because you can put that you achieved that doing the work remotely. So it's actually remote work experience that you could talk about. I actually talked to a woman this week who had earned her master's degree, I think, completely online. And it involved, a huge thesis that she had to do at the end. And she talked about how she had to keep herself on task, and it was a big project management kind of piece to it. So yes, I would say anything, that's distance learning, remote learning, make sure you note that on your resume. That's really good experience.
Excellent. So last question here. And again, if you do have any questions, feel free to type them in the chat. I think I see a few more come in. So here, and we might not be able to answer this, it might be something that we touch on in our future sessions, but how do you manage insurance when you're employed by a company in Canada but working remote in another country?
That is a good question, I think, for another session, because I actually have no idea. I'll be totally honest. I'm not sure.
Yeah, we'll bring that up in our freelance session. Hopefully we'll touch on that. How far back, we're getting a lot of resume questions. How far back should you list jobs that you've had?
I think it depends on how relevant the jobs are to the one that you're going for now. So a good example is I spoke with a person this morning who was a paralegal, and she has about 20 years of paralegal experience. So that brings her back to the late 90s, and she had it all on her resume. And because it was very clear, paralegal experience across the board, we decided to eliminate everything that was earlier than, I think, 2005. And it really helped to shorten her resume. It helped the employers to focus and be able to kind of quickly breeze through it. She still had a lot of really good experience, but it was all more current and very relevant. And so that was an easy way to narrow it down. So I think it depends on your situation, but that's kind of a guideline is if there's a way to eliminate those older jobs, that helps employers really focusing on what you've done recently, what's most relevant to that job listing. The only reason to keep some of those older jobs on your resume is if they are really highly applicable to the type of work that you're applying for and you don't have current experience in those areas. But otherwise, I would, eliminate those older ones to really stay fresh and updated.
Question, and thanks for hanging with us, everyone. When you don't have any work from home experience, where do you start? You just obviously submit the experience that you have, but I guess the question is, where do you start if you have no work from home experience?
Yeah, so I would start with the skills that you have. Are you a really good time manager, task manager? Can you focus really easily? You might talk about in your office experience how you were able to focus and stay away from distractions. And also, communication skills, those types of skills, really make sure that those are represented on your resume and your online profiles. And also talk about, actually literally say like skills for effective remote work. And then you're saying, I know what it takes to work remotely. I have the skills that to do this, and then listing out your skills that way. So you are, telling the employer that you are aware of what it takes to work remotely. And even if you don't have the actual experience, you do have the skills that would fit the bill.
More question actually before we go. It's a good one. So are salary and wages similar to the same for flexible and remote jobs as they would be for a standard job in a specific industry? Or what?
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Yes, good question. Yes. The short answer is yes, they are pretty much the same. So we've done a lot of comparisons for the flexible job listings that we see with salaries listed and what a traditional in-office job would pay for that same type of listing. And they're almost always within a small range of each other. Sometimes it's a little bit more, sometimes it's a little bit less, but it really averages out to be about the same. So there shouldn't be too much of a difference. The only difference we see is if the company is based in a very high or very low cost area, they might be basing their salaries on their cost of living in their location. So if you live in the opposite, like let's say that the company is based in a very low cost of living area and their salaries tend to be lower across the board, but you live in a very high cost area, you're going to see a difference between what you need and what that company is offering. But that's really the only time that we see a difference.
Great. So thank you so much, Brie. Again, there's lots of great links in this presentation. You'll receive it this afternoon, and also the link to the recording will be on our website in a few days. This is just fabulous information, and it's a great kickoff to our Flex Work Style Work series. And our next one is actually on getting started as a freelancer. So taking those next steps to get started. And this is we have a daytime and evening session. So take a look at this session. We have one in May, and then the second one is at the beginning of June, and that will be our last Work It Out with MFS session for the year, but we'll have some starting up in the fall again. And we hope you guys can join us for the freelance session, and if not, some of the resources will be available on the website after. So if your questions did not get answered, I will be sure to address those in the chat myself, so just stay on the chat and I will get to them. So thank you very much to everyone else. Thank you, Brie, and I hope everyone has a great afternoon.